we're moving forward, and we have some news. Real quick. We have one normal thing. Actually, technically, all of these news articles kind of come together for one main topic we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to read through all three of them, and the last one will be what we'll be heavily focusing on. But I'm sure some of you have heard. So this really awesome game came out, Sean. Do you know what it's called?
No. What's the game?
It rhymes with
Hades?
it rhymes with Schmavengers.
Oh man, see, I was thinking, I almost took you seriously, and I was like, Hades. Hades is a fucking phenomenal game,
Hades is
and
excellent.
I don't even like roguelikes very much, except for maybe like when they get creative, like Risk of Rain.
Isn't
and
Hades
Rogue
made by
Legacy.
aren't they made by the same people that made Transistor and Bastion?
I think so, yeah. It's
They
really, really
they
good.
have such a good track record, bro. Like they make excellent. Transistor was fantastic. Bastion was fantastic. Hades is excellent. They have such a good track record. Let me see. Hades developer. Let's find out. Supergiant. Yeah.
I still can't believe the first time you said Hades, you said Hades.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then you've been saying it your entire life as Hades. Even in
yeah.
high school, when everybody else was saying Hades, you were saying Hades.
Yeah, they also made Pyre,
Like,
which I have not played, but I've heard is also an excellent game. But I played Bastion all the way through. I've played Transistor all the way through, and I've seen elements of Pyre, and I've played some of Fate, especially once it came to Steam. I bought it the moment it came to Steam because I didn't want to buy it right away for Epic because I don't really like their launchers, kind of doo-doo. But once it dropped on Steam, I got it. So yeah, but they are like every single game that they make is excellent. So I definitely recommend if you like Hades, whatever the fuck, go back, play Transistor, play Bastion, play Pyre. You'll enjoy those games. So and they're all like vastly different in their gameplay loop and all that. It's really fucking cool. So so Schmavengers, Sean. Schmavengers? It's out, right? It happens. It's under 1,000 concurrent players on PC. That's an ouch. That's a big yikes. So it's causing matchmaking issues. So they've seen a huge dip in concurrent players. It's current. Okay, so this is from Forbes. It's by Paul Tassi. It says Avengers is currently in limbo, with Crystal Dynamics seemingly pushing back a number of its roadmap objectives while simultaneously trying to fix what currently ails the game.
which is the game.
Yeah, most of the gameplay.
Horrible writing, terrible characterization. The characters are boring and dull, which is the opposite of Marvel characters. At least Marvel characters historically. The fucking system's bad. The one-player missions are all excellent, and then when you get into the multiplayer missions, they're just dog shit.
Yeah,
The grind is bad. It's not a game that feels like it's built for being a looter game. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's all just crammed in, which thank you, Square. Great idea. Go fuck yourself.
it seems like it could have been very easily a nice and fun co-op / single player game that wasn't a live service, but they tried to cram in a live service element into it and ended up fucking the experience up. So they're in damage control, trying to fix the game up. Since players don't know when fixes are coming, interest in the game appears to be tapering off at an increased pace, and that's starting to come with a few noticeable issues for players that remain. One of those being matchmaking issues. Even though the game, from what I've heard, has had matchmaking issues since launch, so this is making them even worse. So yeah, if you look on Steam, you can see this was in October 7th. It had dipped to 972 players playing. So that's kind of shit. So hopefully, I mean, at this point, I'm fine with this game just dying and them getting Crystal Dynamics on something else. But that's not going to happen.
The Legacy of Kain reboot.
It's not going to
Or
happen.
a remake.
It's not going to happen because Square has probably invested a lot into this. I'm sure the payments for like the licensing, all that, they're like, shit, we need this to do good. So this might be an Anthem situation if they're able to. We don't even know when Anthem will come back with its 2.0. They have a small team for BioWare working on that shit. So it's kind of a yikes. Like, we don't really know what may come of Avengers, if they'll fix it, like how much time they're willing to dedicate, or if the project will just kind of die. But it's going to be interesting. Just I don't know. Like I'm fine with this game tanking Square, hopefully learning a lesson. I don't know the extent of which that will happen,
Well, the
and
problem with Square is most of the reasons why they've been making the mistakes they have been making is because of failures. It's because of things not meeting expectation. So if this fails, you're going to see all their other titles suffer because of it. It's like a double-edged sword. 13 did was it yeah, 13.
13 was
The
lightning.
the performance, yeah, the performance of 13 and 10-2, and even to a lesser extent 12, led progressively was a domino effect with them, like this diminishing return thing happening. Even with some of the games being successful, they still didn't pull in what they expected them to pull in, and they didn't gain the notoriety they had expected them to gain. Because up until after Final Fantasy X, any Final Fantasy they made printed money, and every one they made just made more money. And then they made 10, and while somewhat divisive, like for instance, everybody making fun of the laughing scene, when that's actually the point, like he was laughing that way for a reason. Like and like nobody fucking takes context in, but whatever. I'm not going to be a Final Fantasy X apologist. The point is, for a lot of people, 10 was their Final Fantasy 7. It was their Final Fantasy 6 or their Final Fantasy 9. These great games that people you know point out as their big motivation for falling into the Final Fantasy franchise. Um, and uh, 10 was that, but then 10-2, they tried to do something different, and I thought it was creative, and I thought it added a nice little end cap onto the Final Fantasy 10 story. And it was very divisive. The gameplay was. It was very much a different experience. It was supposed to be because it's telling a different story. It's a deep story. But then you had 11, and then you had 12, and 11 was online. 12 was the one that wasn't. It was the first Final Fantasy that I can remember that wasn't high fantasy. Well, Tactics, if you want to count Tactics, but the first mainline title that wasn't high
That was the one that
fantasy. I
had
mean, it was
the
absolutely.
MMO style to its play. Where you
Yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
okay,
You had like auto attacks and shit, and you had
yeah.
to build up your AI, and it had the most to do in a world. That's where the real MMO part came in with different times of day, having different characters in different places, and you had a day-night cycle. Different things occurred at different times. You had hunts that were some of the hunts were harder than the boss fights in the game. Like there was one fight that I did in Final Fantasy 12 that took me the better part of like 90 minutes to finish. Like that's how cyclical the fucking thing was. Like I went in stacked with mats and walked out with like having you burn through a huge chunk of my supply. It's just, and you really had to gear your characters smartly and kit your characters out smartly and know what you were doing and who you had designated how, because you could build any of the characters any direction you wanted to. Much like in Final Fantasy X, you had a sphere grid where you'd open nodes, and the node would give you different boosts, abilities, spells, etc. So you'd start leaning characters in one direction, then giving them an edge in another. And I think by the end of the game, I was able to have pretty much every character in at least two different job classes, like a white mage and a black mage, or a blue mage and a fucking heavy sword, that kind of thing. Um, but not as many people got into that one because it was such a drastic change.
Yeah.
And so when they tried to, now bear in mind, when I first started playing it, the world didn't feel like Final Fantasy because it wasn't high fantasy. And for those of you that don't know high fantasy, if you're looking at a world where magic is saturated into everything to where it's not a big deal, like, and there's just massive world changing spells and that kind of thing, and it's very epic, that's high fantasy. But you take a look at something like, say, Game of Thrones, and that's not high fantasy. Like,
It's
either
just normal.
magic's
What was
not a
that be?
common
Normal
thing,
fantasy?
and just fantasy. I don't
Okay.
really know. But in Game of Thrones, like if somebody did do magic, it wasn't usually a massive spell. It was a small
Yeah.
thing. Or conversely,
Like
you could
Witcher.
also have, yeah, Witcher feels very much more grounded.
Yeah.
I would still edge that a little bit more toward high fantasy because there are gods and major things happening in Witcher, but it's a much more grounded because high fantasy is not very grounded. You may have
No, yeah.
tragedy, you can have earthly, realistic things happening to
So
people,
high
but you're
fantasy,
usually fighting for the fate of the
real
world
quick.
or the fate of an entire kingdom.
So high fantasy is the weeb uwu version of normal fantasy. You're saying?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, cool. All makes sense. It's
Um,
clicking. It's clicking.
where and so all of Square has always been like a world-ending threat, a something that's going to completely and utterly erase life as you know
Yeah.
it. This
There's always that
very
meme.
big, epic
Like
deal.
you always
The
start.
spells are all over the top.
Yeah, you always start the
Um,
game. Go find one rabbit, and then quest
yeah,
100 is kill God. So like,
yeah.
yeah,
Whereas with 12, the primary thing was two countries with two different ideologies, one trying to conquer another to end war, and the one they're trying to conquer rebelling, thus spreading war.
yeah,
And so, I mean, and that's really brass tacks breaking it down. And your heroes are the ones that are actually rebelling against order. So, if you looked at it, depending on the perspective you wanted, you could see yourself as actually playing the role of the bad guy, which is really interesting, you know. And I still support them fighting for their ability to be, you know, to choose. But the kingdom that was going to be taking them over, while the ruler basically deciding that he was willing to make the necessary evil changes and be the bad guy if he had to in order to ensure peace and this kind of thing. And it was more political. I mean, you were really just a playing piece caught between one side that valued its freedom to choose, and then another side that valued order and structure. And you're kind of caught in between these two different forces. And I'm not saying there weren't bad guys and things in it, but it was just like the magic was much less over the top. You had great big monsters, but they weren't as quite as fantastical as you might be used to. I mean, they still had all your Final Fantasy staples, you know, the bird with the super long neck and the fucking adamant twice and all that. But it dealt with more common issues. Like I said, the spells were more grounded, the plot was more grounded, and it was more just a war between nations, which you normally saw in like more independent or grassroots style fucking JRPGs. When you did something like that, it was usually the political thrillers. They oftentimes had tactics-based combat, and 12 just did a lot different. So you had 12 really break the mold, and then 13 tried to bring it back some, tried to bring back in some of the alienated players. But when they did that, they made an extremely confusing story that they did not give out the information and the right pacing. So there's a lot of data that you get while you're playing that game that you forget, a lot of relationships that are built up very strangely. There was just a lot of very odd narrative choices made that made the plot very difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. And then on top of that, the gameplay was very repetitive, and they built the combat to be something of an auto battler where you build AI for your companions, similar to the way you do in Kingdom Hearts and in Final Fantasy 12. But that AI was so that the game could run on its own, and then your entire kit for the character was built around what weapon you decided to use and how you upgraded that weapon. And that just didn't feel very much like a Final Fantasy game.
yeah,
Like 12 didn't at first. Like it looked like it and it felt like it at first up until you got involved in the battle and you realized that 12 was much more of a long haul, careful exploration. It was a much more thoughtful game in terms of how you played it than Final Fantasy had been previously in
okay,
the mainline titles. And with 13, it really wasn't. And I don't know, I just 13 was a weaker entry. And then when they released the sequels to 13, the 13.2 and 13.3, they were they just got really fucking batshit with the story. I mean, I've heard kind of some people loved it, some people didn't. I thought they went a little overboard and bananas with it. But it's Final Fantasy, and I still, at the end of the day, I still loved it, even and I loved the characters, even if the story wasn't very good.
yeah.
And
So
15 was just a natural response, like because 13 did the way it did, because of the reception to 12 and the reception to 10 too, like they kept trying to find a way to freshen the formula while still keeping people interested. Uh, but each time you saw them make bigger mistakes than the previous time. rather than like make bigger errors, and it pushed them farther and farther and farther over until you end up with Final Fantasy 15, which feels very much like a spin-off, not a mainline franchise entry. It feels more like Type Zero did in terms of how it differentiates itself from being a Final Fantasy game than how it is similar to a Final Fantasy game. And then, of course, it was unfinished, so you got huge chunks of plot that just weren't in there, except for those who are willing to data mine and do really, really, really persnickety information gathering.
All right.
And now the new one is just completely not a Final Fantasy game. It's like all the way outside of it now.
Yeah, from what we
So
know currently, yeah.
this is happening,
Oh, I think
visually speaking, at
yeah,
least.
I think they
This
just
is all happening because of these failures. So by instead of the thing about Square is when a game fails, they don't fix it. They just dump the idea entirely and try something else entirely. So what they're doing right with Avengers, which needs to be continued, will also be dropped.
yeah.
Like they will just dump the whole fucking thing. They don't learn from their mistakes. They just erase them and never go there again. And you don't want that to happen because that's what's been happening to Final Fantasy. Like, oh, well, we'll just never fucking do that again. That was a mistake. We did. No, it wasn't. You did some great ideas. It's just here, 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 and here. It was like very rough. Remember that for your next thing. Continue to improve on what you're doing. Don't just stop doing it and pick up a whole new fucking genre.
Yeah,
And that's the long-winded answer to your question.
I I get what you're saying, 100%, and I think it'll be interesting to see. I don't know how well 15 did monetarily. I know critically it was like a middle road to bad, uh, receive or whatever how they received it. That's what I think. I'm not entirely sure.
I think it
Let me see.
did. I think it did fairly
Final
well. I think it
Fantasy
was successful.
15 review thing. I see critically. You got an 8.2, 85% of Metacritic. That was critically reviewed well. But a lot of people that leave the reviews are talking shit about it. But okay. So it'd be interesting to see where 16 goes, where it doesn't go, what it does, what it doesn't do, what it abandons, what it keeps homage to. Be interesting. I know recently that they just confirmed that it finished its main story development, so it's moving on to, I don't know what you do after that in game development, but the main story is complete or some shit. So I don't know.
Side quest and whatnot, probably.
I have no clue. But so we actually had received an article from Lark that he's like, oh, this might be an interesting topic for the show. And lo and behold, nothing fucking happened this week. So we're going to talk about it. And I think it could make for a good discussion. So he sent us in. He said it came also from Forest by Paul Tassi. Again, this might be the only writer they have over there that talks about fucking video games. But he said Destiny is World of Warcraft and the live service looter race is ending. So real quick,
I don't like that comparison, but I get it, I suppose.
I mean, I think to a degree, I think Destiny is trying to be World of Warcraft.
I do not look at Destiny as a gold standard. They've made so many fucking massive mistakes.
It's like one of those things where
I don't think they have the title.
It's one of those things where it's in comparison, right? Because there's nothing that's done better than Destiny in sort of looter shooter, because everything else is done awful. So when people look to making a looter shooter game, they take from the thing that's done the best. It doesn't necessarily make it maybe golden standard isn't the proper word, but the standard is, because it's not a good standard. It's just the standard. It's what's done the best in the market for looter shooters. And then that might be, again, that everything else is kind of up to like, but people do use this game as inspiration. Whether you like it or dislike it, Destiny's been used for inspiration for a lot of these future titles. Especially look at Avengers. They literally stole the fucking UI for the inventory. So
what confuses me about Destiny is they used a mouse-based UI in systems that don't use mice, with no intention of doing a PC conversion initially, and they just kept running with it. Why? Why do you do that? The menu takes so fucking long to move through. It drags at times because you can sit there and hold the button for a half second. Hold the button for a half second. There's no fucking point.
Because it looks like Destiny. And Destiny did it, so it's got to be right.
Why did Destiny do it? That's my question.
I thought you were asking why they did it.
What decision-making choice? Like, nobody likes that.
I don't know.
Nobody likes that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Stop that.
I have no clue, to be honest. Like, I can't see a solid reasoning behind having it. because it's all UI. It'd be interesting if like it was something because like I like when games have interactable like objects that have their own monitors. So like in like Star Citizen or Cyberpunk might even have this where you go up to like a room and there's computers in it and you could actually look at the computer and move a little cursor on the computer. I always thought that's cool, but this is just the UI, so there's nothing to do with it. But I always thought that that was interesting. Like Doom 3 did that shit all the time. Or if you go up to a computer in Doom 3, say what you want about Doom 3, but you actually go into that computer, move the cursor around, do whatever you need to do, download the data log, whatever the fuck you need. You do it all through the computer. It's not just hit E on the computer and get the data log. I always thought that was cool. It felt more immersive. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so this dude
Doom 3 would have been great if they didn't try and make it a survival horror. I mean, they didn't try and make it a straight up horror
I think if
game.
they just took the name Doom off of the game and just made it like a survival horror game, I think it would have been
There's a
fun.
lot, there's a lot of pacing issues too, man. That mid section is a slog. Like I stopped playing.
It's
Like
been
I wanted to keep playing it, but it was just so meh.
I would have to go back to it. It's been forever. I was also playing, I think, on like the hardest or second to hardest difficulty, and I was younger, so I might have just been so close to shitting bricks around every corner that I just wasn't even paying attention to the pacing. I'm not too sure. Okay, so the current situation in the looter genre reminds me of what we saw with MMOs years ago. Is a point. So basically, what he's trying to say: WoW came out, right? Massive fucking hit, huge hit. Now, was WoW the first MMO? Hells no. There's been plenty before it, plenty after it, but WoW was what became the golden standard. So when all these MMOs came out after it, they tried to copy its success, copy some of the systems, some of the quality of life improvements that came from like that WoW took advantage of from other games. So like the games before it. Now I was not alive. I wasn't. Some of these I wasn't even alive for. Some I wasn't cognizant of my surroundings for. This is not my forte, but there have been MMOs before WoW. So there was I was actually looking it up, but there's like from the early '90s to early 2000s when WoW came out. There were plenty. So Dungeons and Dragons had one for Neverwinter Nights. They had Ultima. They had something called The Realm Online, which was '96. But
I remember the first. There were text-based ones like
yeah,
Legend of the Red
that's how I
Dragon,
was
like
gonna.
Lord.
There was one called Island of Kesmai, which was in 1985, and it wasn't considered MMO at that point, but it was considered something that was kind of the precursor to MMOs, which was a MUD, a multi-user dungeon. So it'd be like an RPG. You'd have like a little thing made out of shitty pixels, and it'd be like a text-based dungeon, but you did it with multiple people, and that was like the precursor to the MMO before it was like a fully fleshed out world that you could walk around with and interact with other people in. And even back then with multi-user dungeons, they still had subscription fees. So you'd pay every month and you get to do stuff. They'd release content and shit like that. And Island of Kesmai was one of the older ones, 1985. So imagine like playing that and then seeing WoW come out in like 2004 or some shit, bro. Like my mind would fucking explode. Um,
It was intimidating. I remember the first one that I became aware of was Ultima Online, which was more of a fantasy life sim.
that was 97.
Yeah, that was the first one I remember when I was real little, or younger
Yeah,
anyway. And you had to like make food and you had to forge all your weapons and mine materials. And it was like, if you're talking about grinding, that was a grinder's wet dream because you had to do everything. And there were guys that would, and you've heard of this before in other games, where they'd have entire careers in the world of just being a weaponsmith
yeah,
for characters. Like nobody would buy weapons from the
the
shops because you
vendors,
could
yeah,
get better ones from, yeah, you just set your house
or
up
Billy down the
and
road.
yep, and you could completely customize your houses, build them from select parts,
Yeah,
mine the materials for them, the whole nine. Like it was ridiculously deep. They even had a system in it of like an entire ecology system programmed, and the players figured out how to exploit it to the point where entire races of creatures were going extinct because the creatures couldn't breed faster than they were being killed. And so they'd be wiped out of a server and somebody have to manually go and add them back in. And they're
Jesus.
like, all right, this isn't working. Fuck it.
But there's a lot of people. If you were to ask them what they think would be like the genuine like boost of popularity in MMOs, it would be Ultima Online. That was like a lot of people's first MMO, what a lot of people considered like the
That
first,
was expensive.
yeah, first
too.
big MMO and all that other stuff. So, and then eventually the next massive hit that literally broke the internet. I think I don't in WoW's peak, they had close to like I think wasn't it like close to like 15 something millions of subs? Let me see. I don't follow WoW that much. WoW's peak sub count. Not Windows. World of Warcraft at its peak in October 2010, the game had 12 million subscribers. That's crazy. In 2015, it's dropped significantly because of decisions made by the dev team here and there, especially after BFA. But like 12 million people coming home every day, playing a game, this massive world, enjoying the shit out of it, blah, blah, blah. And then so after this, all these other companies are saying, hey, fuck, how do we get a piece of this cake? And then so people start looking to WoW. How can we get people doing this? And for WoW, I think when it comes to continued monetization, continued development, a subscription-based model for video games that need further development is one of the best out there. It's just not a lot of people, especially nowadays with so many games coming out, not a lot of people are super ready to kind of pay that monthly or make that commitment. So people don't like the idea.
I would have done it if they wouldn't have fucked around with Destiny. If they would have done Destiny right, I would have been happy.
Imagine
we were so happy playing that game that like if they would have made a much higher quality game. I mean, not just on a technical standard, because Destiny played like a dream. Like the gunplay was fantastic.
Imagine where it would be today if it did have
every
a subscription
gun felt
model.
different. Like, and how many games have you played where every gun feels just a teensy bit different, handles just a little bit differently? And if they had done a subscription model, it would have been fucking fantastic.
It'd be if it caught on. But I was saying, imagine where it would be today if that was the case. How different would the game look?
I think Activision still might have fucked it up, but
it's possible. They might have never. I don't know. Were they under Activision's reign when they made the game initially? Okay. I was going to say, I don't know if they sold out at some point midway. Okay, Activision probably would have fucked it up. Never mind. Fuck the cancer that is Activision looming over. But yeah, so what happens now is, as the article is saying, he's basically stating that we're seeing a repeat here. What happened to WoW and the MMOs that followed that tried to get a piece of that success, we're seeing with looter shooters. And his two major examples, well, there's a couple, the looter shooters that have came after Destiny, but the two big ones that were hyped that kind of fell apart were Anthem and Avengers, what we saw. Now, Avengers, you don't shoot, but it's the same exact idea. Live service, loot-based game, stuff like that. Anthem being the same thing. So basically, the article is trying to point out that a lot of these games look to Destiny, and even though it's not perfect, but they seek to emulate it to get a chance of that success. Normally, they kind of fail pretty bad. Now, Destiny, when it started, was not the best game in the world. There's actually a lot of issues with Destiny on launch. Not a lot of content, big problems with the game's systems, loot acquisition was kind of shit. Like, Destiny 1.0 for the first game was not good. It took them a while to build that up. And we've seen continuous games do this, where the game comes out and it's just dog shit, and these developers aren't really learning from it's so interesting that these people seek to emulate Destiny, but do not take the efforts to avoid the problems that Destiny had on launch. Right? Did not sit there and be like, "Hey, here's what they launched with. What was the problem with the game? Not a lot of content. Loot was trash. Okay," and then they completely don't even try to avoid those same problems. And these games all launch with the same fucking issues. Even though these same mistakes were made by Bungie a couple of years ago. So I don't know if it's something that they don't care enough about, or
the same mistake. Anthem didn't bother learning from they were even told don't use
the original Division.
Suicidal?
Original Division, same shit. Avengers, same shit. And it's all with, like, they have the game itself. Some of the gameplay elements are pseudo decent, but then you have issues with loot. You have issues with loot acquisition. You have issues with diversity amongst loot, diversity amongst content. There's so many problems that arise. And again, it's not a simple, this is what Destiny did wrong, let's try and fix it. It takes an an intelligent approach to it, obviously. I'm not saying like, oh, let's just not do what they did. That's not the case. Games are a difficult thing to put together, and each game needs its own loot acquisition system. Each game needs its own diverse content depending on how the game plays. So it's not as easy as flipping a switch. I'm not trying to say that here. But with some intelligent approach, which is what these people are paid to do, like they should be trying to do that, you should see a learning happening with these developers, and it's just not. So, but you can say the same thing about what happened with MMOs years back. They tried to approach what WoW did. Now, the thing here is that WoW was so big at the time, it would literally drown out people. Like, it would drown out other games. It would choke them. They just would not have, because with MMOs, they're a huge money sink, and you need to have people supporting them, or you will fail. You won't be able to uphold servers. You won't be able to further content if you're having issues early. You need to retain that player base with MMOs. So the problem was WoW was so good, and it was in its peak, that no one wanted to move. Like, you'd have a new game come out, some people move over, there'd be some kind of differences, distinctions, but they weren't good enough to take any of the major player base away from them. So they just got choked out by WoW. They couldn't sustain a player base. They just fell apart. So I wouldn't say that's necessarily the same issue here, because a lot of these games do try to offer different experiences. It's just they're not launching in decent states to maintain a player base, and it's fucking them over. So, man, I gotta poop so fucking bad. I don't know where this came from. Jesus. So, there's these games, Anthem, Avengers, they've kind of fallen apart, right? They may at some point make a comeback, but with these live service looters and games like this, because you've seen games that take the same approach, but they're not live service, like Borderlands. Division is the same thing as these two, but Borderlands tries to make it its own kind of thing, where it's just a game, you have DLCs, and you play with friends, right? It's not trying to be an ever-expanding world, an ever-evolving kind of experience. So it'd be interesting to see. Now, Destiny is still in a good state with its player base. It's still good with its content. People are still enjoying the game and are still excited to play it. So what the article's kind of proposing is the idea that since a lot of companies, they do watch each other, just sometimes not as smartly as they should, will we stop seeing AAA companies going out there and being like, hey, we want you to take this and make it like Destiny? Like what Square did with the Avengers game. They could have easily sat down and be like, hey, we're going to take the Avengers IP, we're going to make a really solid cooperative experience. It has a campaign, you play, you have fun, something along the lines of like Ultimate Alliance, but a bit more in depth, more like diversity amongst the characters and stuff like that. And we're going to release this, and then if it's good, we'll do additional DLCs or some shit, or it's not going to be live service. But no, they're like, no, we want live service. We want people in the ecosystem. We want them spending as much money as they can throw at us, blah, blah, blah. But the game is shit, so no one gives a fuck. So what this article is proposing is the idea that will we start to see AAA companies take a step back away from this idea with these multiple failures. So EA had their try, right, with Anthem. Now we've seen Square had their try with Avengers. They're still both working on that. They may come back. There may be a point where Anthem 2.0 comes back. It's the best game in the fucking universe. I doubt it, but it's a possibility. Will we stop seeing AAA, high-level publishers attempting what Square did? That's what the thing is. And he's saying it's a possibility. That the looter-shooter game is just too difficult. It'd be just easier to make an actual game and figure a different monetization method out for it and not make it this like continued thing that they want to make a staple of gaming in houses and shit and all of that, like what Destiny has kind of done. So what we're kind of like meld this into is we've played a lot of these games, for better or for worse. Anthem launch was interesting, but what do we think it takes to get a Destiny WoW kind of predominant like head of this genre compared to the Anthems, the Avengers, and the stuff like that? That was going to be kind of our topic. But now that I've kind of given an explanation as to what we're referencing here, we're just going to go through some of the things that we think can make or break some of these titles. I've listed a few of them already, but kind of just go a bit more in depth with some of that. So, do you want me to start, Sean, or what do you think? I'm down for either.
You can start. I finished the movie list. I'm just substituting.
Oh, okay, no problem.
I was gonna say Lovely Molly, but we've got so many. Um, it's a good movie, and I think it's worth watching. But there's so many on here that we have to rent that I decided to try and break it up. So instead of substituting in a Korean zombie horror movie called Alive,
Okay,
which is on Netflix, which most people have.
sounds fine to me. All right.
But it's in the
Yeah,
the
I see it.
Discord.
I see you typing it. Okay,
So you
so
just make sure you mentally substitute that in when you announce the schedule at the end of the podcast.
okay, sounds good. All right. So basically, my idea here was going to go through some things we have seen in these games, and where we think some have failed and some have had good success with, and just some of the gaming systems that, like, what defines a looter shooter, right? Like, what defines a looter lives as a service game, and maybe kind of break that down a bit. But real quick, so a Destiny type game, right? I've usually referred to them as MMO lights because I think that's what Destiny tried to do, because it saw what WoW did and it tried to make something like that for a more casual user base that didn't have to dedicate 9 hours of their day to raid and WoW, blah blah blah. So with these games, they try and give obviously a loot based experience that you have in a quote unquote massively multiplayer world. And that the thing with Destiny is, like, you never were like, let's go to this city, there's 100 dudes running around, right? Usually they'll have like a hub. A lot of these games, in order to afford that, they'll have a hub area, and sometimes you'll see other players, because one big element of these games is when you get loot, what do you do with it outside of doing better? You show that shit off. If you get something that looks cool as fuck, you want to show it off to your peers or to the people around. You want to be that badass in the lobby that has all the cool gear. That's one element. That's why they make a lot of this gear look so cool. It helps feed the desire to go and grind out this gear. Because a lot of it, if it was just for stat increases, like, no people wouldn't be as interested to go grind out gear if it didn't change the way they looked at all. Like, how are you supposed to know that so-and-so ran this raid if he looks the same as a level 5 adventurer, right? Like, you're trying.
Plus, you're trying to make the shit look like you got this ideal visual. You want your character to. I've never cared what anybody else thought about my dude. I just wanted to make them look cool to
Cool.
me.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And you're kind of like that too. Like, you give much less. You don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks about your shit. I remember in Destiny, you used that ugly ass birthday cake fucking color scheme for so long, and I hated it. And you just thought you were the prettiest princess.
That might have been for a meme, but I get what you're saying. But
No, you used the shit out of it. It was this weird fucking pink and blue thing. I guess it worked for you. I still think it looked horrible.
I still, again, yeah, I get what you're saying. And a lot of times when I play games like this, I could get, like, that's why I like glamour systems and or transmog systems. Like, WoW's a transmog system. So if you find a piece of gear that looks nice, you don't have to sacrifice that look or the view you have of your character because for a incremental bonus on your damage, right? Like, you're like, oh shit, this gear has like 1% more crit damage, but it looks like a monkey shit on a piece of tinfoil or some shit. Like, I don't want to wear it, right? So you'll have a system in play that will let you keep your look while still having the incremental bonuses you need to pursue and like later content and stuff, which is nice. So a lot of the times you can maintain that view you have your character, but having enough of a system in place where you're generating that desire to go after stronger content or stronger loot. The loot is satisfying to acquire and provides diversity in gameplay and a satisfying increase in your character's perceived strength, right? So, like, you work hard to get this gun. Not only does this gun help you do later content to stay on that treadmill, that gear treadmill, but on top of that, it's providing diversity to your gameplay. That's what you want. Because one problem that Anthem had is that the gear you were hunting, you weren't getting any diversity to your gameplay, any major diversity. There'd be some things here and there, but for the most part, I think they said like there's like 70 or 80% of all of their end game gear, the highest rarity, was all stat changes. There were no unique effects to them, right? So if you have people on this gear treadmill hunting that 0.3% or 5% or just these percentage increases, and you're not diversifying their gameplay, it makes that gear hunt boring, because you don't, as you feel like the damage you're putting out's better, but you don't feel like your character's growing. Because a lot of these games, when they are MMO RPGs, they're trying to put the RPG environment into a multiplayer element. So with the RPG, a lot of things that make RPGs so interesting is the kits that you create as you play, or the diversity and strategy that you come across as your character grows in power. So with these games, not only are they handling the balance of the stuff they're giving you, they're handling the diversity that it provides, the freedom that you have to experiment with that diversity. So these games are very difficult to properly set up in a way where you're hitting these checkboxes for the people that need it, the people that are playing. And that's why a lot of these games are failing. So again, for the example with Anthem, you weren't seeing enough diversity in gameplay. So the 10-hour player of this type of I almost call it a warframe, of this type of suit is the same as
warframe like that.
yeah, and is the same as the 75-hour player of this type of suit. Your list of tools to you do not shift all that much. So a lot of the time, again, you're sitting on that treadmill for the gear, and you're just sucking up like a cracker every once in a while. You never get like a full on steak. You're just not enjoying yourself. It's just something you do as a chore. And one of the biggest things that a lot of these games fall into is they don't put enough unique and interesting and engaging content. So it falls to just let me get on and do my chore for the day, right? That's one issue that actually Genshin's having in its current state. It's kind of technically a live service game. That's the idea with gacha games. They usually approach from that aspect because they want you to be in the game for multiple years, spending your money trying to get your waifu and all that stuff. Is they're at a point where they have content and they have stuff that can diversify, not heavily, because a lot of it's you diversifying your team, not a single character, but they have stuff that you can do, but it's gated behind a system that doesn't let you grind it, because it's not necessarily built for that type of player base, which is interesting. There's like a kind of a divide between the hardcore player base and the casual player base that's just enjoying the game as a single player RPG with gacha elements. Then you have the other people that's like, all right, we're a week in, I have 600 hours in the game, and I have every character because I spent $12,000 on the game, but I'm being stopped by this resin system, so I can't grind everything out, so I can complete all this content in a week and a half, even though the game just came out. And they're complaining about that, which is it's an understandable thing. But a lot of time, these games have to kind of pick their audience. So Destiny has kind of the audience they sought out was like a more casual version of like a hardcore MMO audience, which is what like WoW provided with like vanilla WoW. It was like a quote unquote hardcore MMO to a degree, with how they approached it with its RPG elements. So kind of bring that into what, like with Genshin. Genshin has to kind of pick: do they want the casual audience that will come in, play a couple hours a day, get off, explore the world a bit, play as a single player game with expanded content, or do they want to adhere to the people and develop for the people that will be playing the game 6-7 hours a day and blowing through content, blah blah blah. So it's something that they have to do, and that all these.
I don't think they expected the response they were getting. I mean, and if they were, they had to know. They had to know that this was going to attract the kind of audience that will dump a lot of hours into it. Now, I
Yeah,
mean, you can
I think.
tell because they tried to gate that off, but it's too good of a game to be a gotcha game, and I don't. Obviously, they're not going to change that
Yeah,
idea,
that's
but
that's one of the divides that the player base is seeing. Is like, yeah, you have the gotcha elements, and that's the audience they're building for. But you can see in the game itself that on top of that, they were also building for like just a single player RPG kind of crowd that will just play through the game and get sucked into it with the level of detail in the world and the writing and the way that they approach the way you play. it's designed to suck you in for multiple hours, right? Like, because typical gacha games, the way they do it, you'll have like some kind of battle system that's RPG turn based usually, or some kind of like strategic kind of thing, like tower defense or something along those lines. You have your waifus, they have their builds, but it's something you hop in and you're not like exploring a massive world. You're playing on stages, where it's like a couple minute stages that you play through. You're gated by some type of stamina. Well, Genshin's just a completely different approach altogether. And I would like to sit down with them and see how much of it is the devs themselves trying to fit the two together, or if there's some kind of issue with like investors or publishers, like, oh, you need to have something like this. This is the type of game we're going for. We know you put all this time and love into this world, but we still want these CD systems in play because they're going to make us money. So I wonder how far of this, or is it just the devs themselves like, this is what we do, this is what we want to do. We're trying to branch out here, but not enough where it's just its own game. So we're still going to implement these systems, even though they're implemented poorly. So it'd be interesting to talk down, go learn Chinese, and go break into the country, kill the leader, and then talk to... Well, I didn't say that. Wait, if you're listening, who are the people that listen to the show? I was like, what, India and some shit? I don't think it was China. Do we have any Chinese listeners? I doubt it. We're probably banned in China. Does Spotify even exist in China? So many questions I have no answers to. What do you think, Sean? Spotify exists in China?
I do not think the Chinese government would take kindly to what we say.
Fuck China.
We would be seen as immoral, blah, 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 etc., corruptive influence to the morality of
They have karaoke services in China. Like an app.
Of course they do.
Okay, let's get back on topic. So yeah, that's another game that's kind of, well, gachas have always been that. They've been or games as a service, whatever the fucks, for ages. That's how they work. Their monetization comes mostly from quote unquote, they're technically loot boxes and there's characters in them, and that's how they do it. They have the FOMO of the characters being limited time sometimes, and they sell sex usually. Like you got usually. That's not always the case.
Less of a thing in this one. Like, I won't say that they don't design the characters to be attractive in some ways, but like they really don't.
They don't got like tits out, ass all over.
But then again, it is a Chinese developer, and China frowns very heavily on that. Well, the government does.
Yeah. So, but okay. So that's one important thing. When you got the people on the gear treadmill, you need to be giving them enough. It's just like how you probably heard it before. I don't know who said it. But when it comes to gameplay, when you're manufacturing a gameplay loop, you are keeping it, for the most part, the same. But every time the person playing the game does the loop, they go through the loop again, you're adding in enough diversity each time where it doesn't feel like they're doing the same thing, even though they are, right? And that's the trick that you're trying to pull on the person playing the game, where you're providing enough diversity within that gameplay loop, so every time they perform literally the same thing, they are still feeling like it's something new, because you're applying that diversity. The same thing goes with how you grind or acquire gear. You need to have significant diversity in that system, so you feel like you're being rewarded for the time you're giving in. And some games just don't feel that way. Anthem has an issue. I don't even think there should be fucking gear in the Avengers game, because it's every application of it sounds retarded. Why am I changing out the Hulk's spine for a different one? Like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, it would make sense like on Iron Man, I guess. But even then, you get no look from your gear. The gear doesn't even show on your characters because they want to sell the skins. So the gear just seems so like half-assed as an approach to the game, where it literally feels tacked on. Like with Anthem, it kind of felt like the game was kind of based around it. Avengers, it's just like they threw this shit on the last month. Like, quick, dude, go give me a spreadsheet, write a bunch of different stat differences. Like, you can build the Hulk as like a ranged DPS. Can you tell me a single fucking person that would play the Hulk and throw rocks at people instead of running in there and beating the ever-living fuck out of them? Like, it's just so bad. It's so badly put together. It is trash. It's just dumb. And it's just, again, it's the same thing there, where now you have a problem where, since there's close to no diversity that's applicable in the gameplay, they can throw 100 pieces of gear at you, but if the player doesn't want any of them, now you have a problem where you're just shoveling shit into the player's lap that they have to kind of manage through to waste their time, which is, again, there's like so many elements to the gear treadmill that you can fuck up, get incorrectly, or just not fully devote yourselves to that can ruin the rest of the game. Because these games are called live service looters, looter shooters, looter beat 'em ups, whatever. The loot's kind of important. So you'd think they dedicate a bit more time to that, or listen to what other games did with their loot system, or maybe took a seminar on how loot works. I just play the games and I got an idea of how this shit works. So you'd think they kind of figure it out at some point, but I just don't know. Like, I don't know how there's multiple attempts at this that have gone so poorly each time. It just blows my mind. But I've
we
talked
know
way
why
too much.
Anthem failed.
Oh yeah, true. We do know why Anthem failed. Anthem.
You can pinpoint exactly what happened there.
Yeah, thank you, Jason Schreier, for that. That was his name, right? Jason Schreier? I'm pretty sure. The
Jason
whole
Schreier,
expose he did.
Only good part about Otaku is
Yeah.
fucking Jason Schreier.
Yeah, Kotaku sucks in every other regard, but Jason Schreier's
Yep.
dope. But Sean, what do you think when it comes to the looter part of the live service looter shooter? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I already know that really good gameplay does not save a looter shooter, but it is the cornerstone that everything else has to be built on.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason Destiny survived as well as it did,
Gameplay.
considering how much garbage they did, was because the gameplay, specifically the way the shooting was done really well, but the missions, most of them were boring. They were half-assed, didn't put a lot of effort into them. But the ones that shined, that really shone, like especially in the last expansion with the Siva thing, the strikes and the raids that they had were just incredibly well designed.
Okay, well,
Like, you didn't mind doing the Siva strikes over and over again because they were so interesting to look at, and you went through these different environments.
yeah, they were fun.
That it was, remember that one where you had to go up the one silo and then down the other silo, and you were jumping from platform to platform, and then you ended up in this giant room with that boss that had the insane shields.
Oh yeah.
And so
Again,
somebody would work on breaking the shields down while the others were trying to do actual damage.
real quick though, like I definitely want to talk about this. Is really my next really big point, but like that's like a content approach, right? I'm just talking about like how you like for the gear itself and that gear treadmill. You have any additional thoughts? Because I'd love to talk about content because I think like.
Well, I think the gear is the least important part to me.
Okay.
I mean, I'm in it to enjoy playing the game. The gear I'm less concerned about, but you want I think it takes a balance. I think Final Fantasy does a really great job with that balance. They give you a lot of really interesting gear to be able to have access to, but there's a lot of really good gear that you have to work for. And if you want a full set or a specific look, you're going to have to go and grind a dungeon, and you've got a percentage chance of getting what you're looking for. Which means you may be playing that dungeon for a little while, but you know for a fact you will get it.
Yeah.
You will get it.
One
it's
interesting
just a
thing
matter of time.
About 14 is I think that actually the gear in 14 is a little safe compared to other MMOs because what I was talking about before is there is no diversity in 14's gear system. Outside, okay, that's a kind of a lie. Like none at all is kind of a lie because they do have the melding system, so you can boost certain stats. But when it comes to gameplay, your gear does not affect the way
you're talking about rolls.
Yeah, Oh wait, what gear are you talking about?
Okay, well, I mean, you could have not all looter shooters have gear with like necessarily stat differences. Some of them are just damage differences.
No, I mean,
or maybe they give you.
I mean, like Destiny again as a kind of a standard. So say you're playing
rolls
and you get a gun or something, right? So this gun you've gotten before, but you didn't, like you're saying, the rolls. These rolls affect how you use this gun now, and some guns have best in slot rolls, which means that these are the best perks you can get on this weapon. This is how you should play once you have these perks. That's the kind of diversity I'm talking about. With like 14,
yeah,
a piece of gear.
There was a shotgun in the first Destiny that I got like 7 times. And you could only get it through that one dude that would make guns for you, and you had to run quests for the parts, and you had to take the mission, and you had to grind them out, and then he'd make it, and then you'd pray that you got the roll you were looking for. And I had to make that thing 7 times to get the ultimate shotgun. And that shotgun was better than the fucking epic level ones, the legendary ones.
Yeah.
It was just beast mode. I remember it was just so good
Yeah, and that
with
grind.
that particular roll set,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
was worth it. I think you have to give somebody it needs to be challenging, but not so challenging that they're going to give up.
Yeah.
So what I do and what I've said many times is is have a system in place where somebody can set something as their goal. Like they can go in and have a little menu where you're talking to the guy who makes the guns, and you can select a gun you're gunning for. This is the gun I want. This is the role I'm looking for. And then every time you try and do it, your percentage towards successfully doing it gets slightly better. So your odds toward rolling the gun increase exponentially, or maybe not exponentially, that's a bit much, but increases every time you do it so that you're pretty much guaranteed to get it, like say by your fourth or fifth try,
Yeah.
right? Depending on how extreme the piece of equipment is, like I want to know that I'm going to be able to do it within a reasonable set of time. Like by the time I got it on my seventh try, I was so fucking done running that grind for months that because he didn't always have that gun in the lineup. I think it was called the Matador, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, even
And
if
it
you
never had
consider,
something to do with
if you
bulls.
compare it to
Uh,
the Gallahorn grind, everyone grinding, I don't know if it was a raid or a strike, but yeah, everyone, the chance, the drop rate for the Gallahorn was so low, but it was such an excellent rocket launcher that when people finally got this shit after hours of running it, like people literally lost their shit because it was just a really rare drop. So there's kind of there's an interesting balance where as much as like being able to pick and work something, like they have to kind of also set it up in a way where you can't have people grind everything out because the one issue with these games is you have to balance the amount of content you're generating with the amount of time people spend in the game. So they'll put in little blockades that help slow your progress, whether it be a full-on stamina system like something we see in Genshin, or RNG that we'll see in more MMOs, where there is a drop rate, or you can get something, but that the best in slot thing that you need, you have to roll not only once to get it, but then another 3 to 4 times, which is the problem WoW had with the Titan forging and stuff, where you can get the gear you need, Sean, from the raid. But if that gear doesn't have this substat and this tertiary stat and these sockets, you're fucked. That gear is not what you need. You may be able to equip it, but you still need to grind the thing another 50 times if you want the best in slot that you need. And you need to get all 5 rolls properly, or like how 76 does it. I can go get a piece of gear, and it's literally a roll of everything. Like it's like, give me a legendary ranged weapon. So not only does it have to be level 50, not only does it have to have 3 stars, not only does it have to be the gun I need that I'm building towards, it also has to have this legendary perk and this legendary perk. And they'll implement
I
those
think
systems.
making too much shit random becomes
It
tiresome.
is,
Like
and that's the problem WoW had.
I like I think that each game does something a little bit interesting that you could learn from. Like with Destiny, most of your roles were good, but not great.
Yeah.
And it was, I think if you could sit there and designate what you're going for, and each element, like you want this role and you want this role, you can have a maximum of 2 roles, right? And you want this gun. So you're dealing with 3 different percentages, and depending on what grade, say it's like A through C, like an A grade roll or a C grade roll, whatever it is that you're willing to take, and then the odds go up, it's so on and so forth. But you've got a maximum of, say, 10 tries before you actually get it. So you're going to
Like a
get it within
pity
the next
system
month or two.
within
Yes,
gotchas, yeah.
yes. But in the equipment, I always thought that would be best because by the time I was on my seventh try for the Matador, I was so fucking exhausted from doing the same boring shit over and over again that when I did get it, I didn't have that sense of satisfaction. I was just, finally, I'm fucking done.
Yeah, some
And it
people
wasn't until I got to start using it again, and then I was like, oh, this is so nice.
that
But I think there is
a
pushing
balance.
people past a stress point. Like you want to, you want to address pain points, right? And you don't want to but baby people, because obviously you're there to have a successful business. You're there for the product to stay fresh and vibrant in people's minds. So you don't want it to wear on them to the point that they're irritated with it and don't want to deal with it anymore. And I know that they've got this shit down to a science, but I disagree with the science. And so I love the fact that you could get different roles and you could get different versions of a weapon and find your favorite weapon in a better model. So I think that was a really good idea. But the it being completely random part and not being able to influence that, like maybe grind out more parts to get a better chance at
So
getting it,
I think they
or
eventually introduced the masterwork system, which
they
solves
did.
that problem because you can now, if you get the gun, now you can re-roll the rolls on it for better rolls. So it's not getting it's so you don't
Yeah.
have to grind the gun out. It's
The,
as you play, you'll be given the
I would
masterwork
say
course.
I would say the master, because you still have the random stuff, but I still think the masterwork idea was a great workaround to allow people to customize their guns. And I think that's the thing, is giving the players an additional grind to customize the guns with specific stat boosts and attributes is a great fucking idea. And I think that I love what Anthem did, where you could mix and match parts, you could mix and match colors, you could find materials that gave you the ability to do additional colors, and you could fully customize how your dude looked. And I fucking love that, because I could take all these different parts and create a unique image, and I thought that was fantastic. Where you couldn't do that with, I mean, Destiny. I mean, you sort of could, but I mean, the parts would look so drastically different, and you couldn't customize colors in the same way. You couldn't pick
Yeah,
like
it'd just be like a
this shade
template.
for this. It would
Yeah.
be, yeah, a template. Like these sections are going to be light purple. These sections will be blue. You couldn't say, no, I don't want that light purple. Just make the whole thing blue. Or let's grab this silver and that yellow. None of that would work, which kind of sucked. So you had to go with like these predisposed um, uh, aesthetic blends of colors for different
Yeah.
parts that just didn't work as well for me. So I thought that Anthem did a bit of it right, and I've seen one of the games that you guys played that I didn't, where you could customize your guns with parts, and I think that was the one where they took over like DC or something like that.
Oh, Division.
Where you could get a laser sight and a sniper sight, and then you could customize your clip, or your not your clip, but your magazine. You could
Yeah.
customize
Well, yeah,
the butt of the rifle. You could do these different parts to create a gun that behaves and performs in a specific way, but you had to grind for all of those parts. And I don't know if it was a division or if it was something else, but I think that's a great idea, having different parts you can grind for to further customize, like letting people play the game or customize the game to fit their tastes is fantastic. When you have great gameplay, because Anthem did have fantastically fun gameplay. As a matter of fact, it was more fun to play than Destiny was, but the gunplay was significantly inferior. It was just the being you had that additional mobility and flying around and whatnot just added a whole new layer of just ridiculously fun to play. Holding that controller was fantastic. If I didn't have to pay for the fucking game, I'd be perfectly happy to go back and play it some more here and there, just so I could fly around and kill more shit,
yeah.
even if the game beats my ass.
The mobility, the feel, the sound design of the suits was all really good. Really good. It's
Yeah,
just
they nailed the Iron Man thing like
yeah.
hardcore. They nailed it really good.
I like that all the suits actually flew differently too, controlled differently. You definitely felt unique in what you were wearing. It's just
Yep.
yeah, but how you're saying the gunplay kind of fell a little bit flat. I don't think there was enough response from the things you were shooting at. So a
That
lot of
and
time it
like
felt like you're
the
firing BB
mods that you
guns.
added in. The mods didn't really make a big enough difference in
Yeah,
how
that's what I
the
was saying.
things
There
handled it.
wasn't enough diversity in your kit. Like I was saying, like a 10 player,
Yeah.
a 10-hour dude is the same exact person as like a 70-hour dude. It's just you were doing more damage. That's not fun because you're not growing outside of the numbers you pump out. And that's the same thing as changing a difficulty setting at that point. So that's not
And
fun.
with Genshin, like the weapon variety is perfect where you're at now in the game for a one player game. You've got like say maybe six or so viable weapons per class. Not as many for the pole arms as of yet, but for the most part, like I can find plenty of blue which is like a medium rarity weapons that when powered up give work really nicely with different kits. Like I have one of every blue weapon up to at least level 20. Half of them are at level 40, and I've got a good chunk of my purple weapons to 50. And I think that they work fantastic. Like you really don't need the purple weapons to kick ass in this game because the blue weapons, when powered up, when you take the time to build them up, work really, really well. And I appreciate that. But they do let you find, like it just feels like it doesn't, the mix doesn't work because the I don't have any problem with the loot that is available in this game and having to hunt specific enemies for specific parts. I mean, it's really not all that different than Monster Hunter. It's just Monster Hunter is a shitload more difficult and takes more strategy in the fight
Yeah.
in terms of how you're maneuvering and shit. And with this, your maneuvering isn't half as important as what element you're using with what. That's where your primary damage and battle manipulation comes from. So the mixture of the artifacts and the weapons is not anything we're unfamiliar with. We've played tons of RPGs that do the exact same thing. That's not any different. I just think that it's that part is fine, but it really isn't designed. It doesn't play as a gotcha game. It doesn't play as a games as a service, spend lots of money on us game, and I think that's where it's going to run into problems. But again, it's doing the same thing that Destiny did, where they've got a great foundation. I just hope they make better decisions and where they
I
go
think
with it.
I
But
think once they start to see money drop out, because players will drop out, that's when they're going to start to see issues. Right now, we're in the hype phase. There's still a lot of people in the honeymoon phase of the game that are still willing to spend a lot of money. They're not necessarily at the wall of problems that exists end game. And once they run into that, then we'll start to see interesting things. People have been sending a lot of feedback to me, Hoyo. Um, but I've heard some things like the same thing was happening with some of the beta tests, and there was some issues with them responding to any of that as well. So it'd be interesting to see what happens once the wallet starts to get hit, right? Because a lot of gacha, to be honest, a lot of gacha games when they release in pretty shitty states, and then over the course of 6 months to a year, they become better once the greed starts to die down and the game starts to mature a bit. But there's a lot of
when they
games that,
well, that's kind of when they have to insert the quality.
yeah. But I'd be interested to. I'm interested in the potential of Genshin as well, 100%. And a lot of looter-based games have that potential because if they have an interesting world, interesting gameplay loop, they could keep you invested for long periods of time. And that's
I
where
think
the
it's just
go
give
ahead.
them the ability to approach the loot from different directions. Make the loot viable. And even if you're going to give them a bunch of trash, make sure the trash is useful for something. Like in this game, if I get a chest full of fucking gray weapons or green weapons especially, I don't care. That's food for fucking something else. Like I'm
Yeah,
glad to have it,
yeah,
and give them the ability to get those crystals and to mine those crystals. Like there's no excuse to not buff up a weapon in this game. They completely give you all the tools you need to be able to do so. There is no reason why you can't do it. Now they do make some of the shit a lot harder to get than others, especially more high up you get. And I think you can really tell it's a gotcha game in that area because once you start hitting higher levels with the weapons, like you're spending an hour of your time just to get enough stuff to bring a one weapon
yeah.
up one
To
level. And that's not
advance it, yeah,
even, that's just to ascend it to raise the level cap. That's not even counting the amount of work it's going to take to get the materials to then level it up to that level cap. Like that's a
yeah.
lot of time that
You could
you're
also
putting in.
see. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The only reason it's going fast for us is because we're very thorough. We go from point A to point B. We clean everything we fucking see on the way
Oh yeah,
there. So
dude.
we're picking up
When I
just a
sign
lot
in,
of incidental stuff that's useful.
every day, I do the commissions. I'll explore a bit after I finish all this, but I'll do the commissions because I really do enjoy exploring. And there's still a lot of chests I have not found. It's kind of crazy, but I'll start with the commissions. I'll do all that. Grab the people I've sent out. I do the battle pass dailies and stuff. But after that, there's the book they give you. It will lead you to bosses. I go and kill every single one of those motherfuckers until it tells me I can't kill anymore because they all give shit that you will need. Because the problem, what people will run into is that if they aren't thorough, like we are, you'll run to a point where you just don't have the resource. And this game has a good system with its alchemy set where you can take lower tier shit and turn it into mid to high tier shit just by having enough of the lower tier shit, which also
You just gotta be
incentivizes.
careful. Don't do it with all of that
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you're gonna need
you
some of
might
that
need
lower
some of
tier
it. Yeah,
shit later. I made that mistake.
yeah. So that also incentivizes you playing in people's worlds that might not be the same world level because they'll still drop that shit that you need. So you're always kind of working towards something, which is good. Also, one interesting thing, Sean, about the co-op event. We need to stop talking about Genshin, but the co-op event, um,
Well,
when
it
you
fits the subject.
when you
It is a
do it,
game as a service.
yeah, when you do it, when you get the rewards are based on your world level, not the host's world level, which is really nice. So
Oh,
that they
okay.
need to make that change for every
So we
system in
can
the game.
have like Chris do it then, so that he can play with us. We can
Yeah,
just
you
go to
can
his shit
literally
world level,
you
and
could
then
yeah have everyone jump in the lowest tier world level and all do the event together, and you won't be punished at it for all, which is an amazing idea. And I personally think that every mechanic that uses resin should operate in that manner. If you're going to maybe not the domains because those are kind of different and it'd be easier to farm, but if you're doing like a world boss or something and you go to do it, like the fight isn't that much more difficult on a higher world level. Just let people use the resin to get shit from their tier so they're not being punished for playing with friends, kind of thing. I don't think any cooperative game ever should punish you for playing with friends. That's not how co-op should work. That you should never be punished for playing with others. But yeah, yeah. So
well,
that
that's
aside,
they did a pretty good job with that on what was that one fucking
Final Fantasy
game?
does a good job with that stuff.
Yeah, and Elder Scrolls
Oh yeah,
Online,
ESO was really good with that because
because your
everything
gear was
scaled.
based on your level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Fallout 76
I
just
kind of,
recently.
I really still miss that whole fucking walking into an area and realizing that you're not strong enough for it because you get clapped. Like that was, I kind of missed that. But in the end, the way the gear dropped in that worked out so much better because it was based off of
Yeah,
level.
76 has that too. They just recently introduced it where now if you're walking around with someone, whatever person you see is the same thing the other person sees. They are within a level range. Not everything is exactly your level, but there's like tiers of enemies. So the higher tier enemies will be closer to your level, where the lower tier enemies will be a bit below your level. So everyone has the same experience as you group together and do stuff, which is really nice too. And it's the same way ESO handled it. Although I think ESO everything was just your level, there was no range. So there was no like variety in that part. But yeah, yeah. So definitely gear.
I just think that the gear should never be 100% RNG.
No, yeah, definitely
Never
not.
be 100% RNG. Like that's one thing that I think is the biggest point to take away from this is there's too many that go 100% RNG on it. Like it should never be 100% RNG. You should know that, all right, if I do this dungeon, I'm definitely going to get at least one piece of this gear, and you may not have control over the fine tuning of it, but you're going to at least be able to come closer to that whatever it is that you're trying to do. It shouldn't be like the way some WoW does it or the way Destiny does it, where you're just in terms of like it's completely random what weapons you're going to get. It's completely like it. I think it's important to be able to know where you can go to farm things and not have it so random that you just never know when you're going to get it. Like you need to give somebody an area that they can focus their efforts.
I get that.
Like
Or a system.
it's like it's super random with like what was it? Anthem had no like there was no telling what you were going to get where. It was just always a random drop.
Yeah, I think the rarity was higher. That was it. But either
Yeah.
that or if they're gonna have RNG, that's fine. But there should be a system in play to help circumvent how badly fucked you can get by the RNG, like some kind of reroll system, like the Masterworks. But I get why they have the RNG. I understand it. It's to artificially extend your playtime. They want you in the game as long as they can. It will help with while they're developing content. It will prevent them from like because the longer they can keep you in content, the less content they have to develop in between patch cycles, right? So they want to make sure that people are still pseudo engaged with what they're doing without having these developers have to kill themselves to produce enough content to keep the players happy in between patch cycles. So it's definitely a delicate balance you have to find, and a lot of companies will implement systems to slow that down just so it puts a little bit less weight on the developers so people aren't sitting around doing nothing for weeks and that just kills off player bases if that happens too many times. So but yeah, so now that we spoke about the content, that'd be an interesting to move forward to. What kind of content do you think you need to have in these types of games? Because with these games and them being on usually some kind of strict patch cycle where they'll have it like we have 6 weeks or whatever until new content comes out. You have a month or 2 months or 3 months, whatever, until new content comes out. And whatever content you get here, there'll be small hot fixes in between or events that happen in between. But for major content drops, you're going to have to wait this amount of time to get new stuff and do whatever you want with the stuff in between. So this leads to some downsides with this stuff. A lot of these games where games can do it wrong is they'll think that, hey, because this is the case and we need to figure out a way to remove some weight off the dev team, let's reuse content. And a lot of games like this will reuse content. Destiny did it. Anthem did it. You'll go, like at times, you'll have like 5 dungeons on the map and you run into them to do different things. And the dungeons look exactly the same. Maybe they'll spread like enemy placement differently, or there might be a different boss at the end. But you're in the same dungeon thing, so they reuse content. That's not necessarily a negative thing if there's enough diversity within the content itself that it will bother you. But a lot of times they'll reuse their world, which is again give or take. It can be a pro or a con depending on how they do it in the world. But where important content needs to be is there needs to be a nice. In my opinion, there needs to be a nice rack up on challenge, right? Like, I think that you should have, like, your main campaign or whatever you're doing be pseudo-difficult with some interesting bosses, diversity in that gameplay, right? You want people to be invested, help teach them how to play the game, do all that stuff. And you want to make sure that when they get to mid to late game, introduce whatever that artificial slowdown is that you need so people don't blow through content, obviously. But I would like to see enough diversity in those battles, right? Like, I think Destiny, what it does best out of everything is its gunplay and its raids. Destiny's raids are some of the best examples of raids I've ever played through. They are vast, they are full of secrets, they are interesting, they can be handled in different ways. You can learn things about them as you play, different ways to skip shit. The bosses are unique and varied, and your experience within them requires a lot of people cooperating together, and there's challenge to them. They're difficult. You're supposed to be in them for long times. I think the raids in Destiny are phenomenal. And to be fair, in these other 2 games, we haven't even seen anything close to what can be considered raid content yet. In Avengers and or Anthem, they didn't have anything close to raid content, so we can't.
Yeah, Avengers is extremely bare bones, and fucking Destiny made the same mistake with both of its incarnations, with the mainline and the sequel, in terms of not providing enough shit.
Yeah, but I think that the best gear in the game should always be behind raids. I think that if you want the best gear for your character, some of the best gear in the game, it should always be behind the most challenging content. That's one interesting thing that happened with WoW before as well, where sometimes you could acquire some of the best gear for your character outside of raid content, and there was a little dispute there. Now, if it's like 1 or 2 pieces of your full set, I wouldn't really be all that bothered by it, but if they can get like full-on sets of gear outside of raid content to appeal to a casual base, I think that's bad for the raid scene in general. You want people in the raids doing them and clearing them, or beating their head against the wall until they clear them, because some of the Destiny raids were a pain in the ass, especially late Destiny 1 into early Destiny 2. We unfortunately fell out of Destiny 2, especially once they started doing a lot of bullshit with Activision. That was a fucking mess. If they ever introduce crossplay, I would love to go back to Destiny. I would love to get back into Destiny, play Destiny again, because that's how much I enjoy their raids in the game. But
unfortunately, they made a lot of fucking horrible mistakes in order to make it viable now and cope with the damage by Activision.
Oh, again, we'll have to see the state of the game if they ever do introduce that shit. But I think that raids are necessary in these games because I'm so attached to them and what they can do and the experiences we've had inside of raids playing together and stuff. I just love the feeling I get from playing them. The feelings I've played in 14, even though most of them I've done by myself. Just the people I've been playing with have been fun to play with, but I enjoy the intense cooperation required by them. They all require intense cooperation amongst your entire team. In the harder
communication.
Yeah. Even to the point where if one person fucks up, everyone dies. Like, I think that's cool as fuck. Some people think it may breed it kind of does breed a pseudo toxic nature because everyone's trying to get through it. Sometimes these fights take a long time, like upwards of like 15 to 20 minutes. So if someone fucks up near the end and it makes everyone restart, that can breed some anger, obviously. And we've had our share of those experiences. Get your pussy out of your ass.
Or Jonathan just fucking vanishing.
Yeah, but I still think that everything else is worth it. And I sometimes, a lot of times, we look back and those rage moments were some of the funniest shit, like looking back on it. But I think they're necessary. They have to be in there somewhere. I think you should have at least one planned for the launch of your game, something for people to do weekly, because people will get there eventually. No matter how much slowdown you put in, people will get there. You should have one high-end instanced level, or one high-end level instanced content somewhere in your game, either at launch or close to launch, so people can play it. And then for other content, I think all it really requires is, I just want variation, right? I don't want to have to, like, if you're going to make us do these strikes every day or something, have enough where I'm not doing the same 3 over the course of 3 weeks or some shit. It just gets tiresome. One of the biggest problems with these games is trying to make it where you're having engaging gameplay where it doesn't feel like a massive chore. You don't want to turn people off with the fact that it's like now it's a part-time job. It's not a video game they're playing. That's when you start to kind of lose the fun element there. Some people enjoy that shit, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, and a lot of this, from what we're saying, isn't like how to make an excellent looter shooter. It's just what we think make them good and what we particularly enjoy. Some people can enjoy the boring ram your head against the wall grinds as this kind of a thing you do. And I wouldn't tell them they're wrong. I just don't personally agree that that's what makes a game good, and not many people will. But I think that, yes, you have to have high-end content. Best gear needs to be locked behind that high content, in my opinion. You should have to do it. And if I also like the idea that Destiny does not have matchmaking for their endgame content. I like that the people, if they want to do it, they have to go out into the community to look for a group. I think promoting a social aspect in these games is very important. It builds a community. And if you make friends in these games, it does a wonder of keeping people attached to them, which is what devs want. So having a more social element and having people attached to the community and the world will keep people in their games longer. So it's a good idea. That's why I don't think in your highest end content, you should not be able to search for a party for that stuff. There should be no matchmaking for that. You should have to go out, find a group, get in a guild, do stuff that way, because that will breed that community interaction, which is what keep people in the game. The moment you choose like an LFG system, or a matchmaking system is a better term, like a matchmaking system that just pairs everyone together. People pair together, do the instance, leave. No one adds anyone. No one talks to anyone. One and done. GG. No one likes that, and you're not building any community that way. So I think that's important nature that needs to kind of be upheld too. I just think it's important. I don't think 100% you have to have it, but I think it's really important for content. But yeah, as long as there's, again, the biggest word here is diversity. Making sure that if you're doing like weekly reset content, that it's not the same mission. You have unique missions, that they have different modifiers that kind of alter gameplay, make you think before you go in. Like, oh shit, well, we got this. There's a boost in electro damage, whatever. It could be something as simple as that, or something as crazy as enemies acting differently. I don't know. But you need to be able to make it where people want to engage in your content in a level where they are strategically thinking, all that kind of shit. I think that'd be good for the stuff that's on the reset, right? Another way of people artificially slowing down is doing lockouts. You can only do the raid once a week. You can only get gear from the raid once a week, right? You don't want people to be able to do the raid 50 times in one night and have everything in the game. You don't want that. So lockouts are another way of artificially slowing down progression for the player base. So on the lockout content, you want to make sure you have diversity as well, whether it be through modifiers, the levels themselves, the battle formation, like the way the enemies are placed in the battleground, diversity, whatever the fuck it is. Make it interesting. I think Destiny does a good enough job. Sometimes they'll have patch cycles where their content's a little lacking, or you'll be doing the same thing over and over. It's like, oh, it's this level. I've done this shit 150 fucking times. But so they could probably do a little bit better there. But again, it's a delicate balance. And I think they've done pretty good with their content in general, especially knowing how big of a fan I am of their raids. I think they do good. And I know, Sean, you had originally brought up the idea of content earlier before we moved into it. Do you have anything else you want to say
I
on
think
content?
if you can, I think Destiny is a perfect example of how content can help something survive but not save it.
Yeah,
Again, Anthem didn't have much in the way of
it
content
didn't. Like I think
variety,
the end
but the
game thing.
gameplay was wonderful.
I think the end game thing was literally one mission a week, and then the mission reset, and then they added another one eventually, and it was just the main story mission. It literally was the exact same mission, but you did it with people. Like their
Yep.
content diversity was trash in Anthem. It was really bad. But the gameplay helped keep people there for a bit. I don't know how big it is now. If it is even got people playing at all, I don't know. But yeah, that I think that's very important. Like you should, if you're gonna reuse content, fine. You should not be copy pasting shit. That's a big no no. People will see that like it's no tomorrow, and that's when people start to know like, hey, they don't give a fuck. Like they literally just copy pasted the final mission in the game. Like that's a no bueno. You don't do that shit. I'm sorry. Continue.
But I think that's the big thing. Like if all of them had a recipe for success in there. They all had something going for them. I like Anthem was just fun.
Yeah, it
And it
was.
got ruined by greed. It got ruined by bad design. It got ruined by bad management. Like they just made a clusterfuck of bad decisions going all the way up. So you end up with something that I wanted to love. The world was interesting. Why couldn't I explore everything I could see? That didn't make any sense. The why did the big walkers not move? Why did I notice all these budget cuts and corners cut when this world should have felt more alive? Because at first it did. And then you started realizing all these areas that were just kind of cut. These things didn't move. These devices didn't work. This area just fucking runs into an invisible wall. They don't want you
Yeah.
to go in here, so the game just pushes you away. Like, you gave me a perfect suit to explore this world, find interesting hidden boss characters and interesting hidden dungeons and interesting bits of lore, and then you refused to let me use it because you didn't have time, because you couldn't program it properly, because you had to cut all this shit out that you had planned to put in there. So you gave me 60% of what you had planned to have in the game. It's the same fucking problem Final Fantasy 15 had, only 15 felt like a complete product, except for the fact that they didn't finish 30% of the story, and that was a key 30%. So you've got a rough idea of what happened, but the specifics are always going to be vague. And the other thing is Anthem had like next to no story. Like their story was meh, whatever. Like it
Yeah,
was one
it's
of the
not
few
good.
times where I didn't care about skipping cutscenes. Like fuck it, let's skip them. Like none of the characters were interesting or compelling. I liked the mechanic chick. That was about it. That was the hub was boring. It was tiny. I'm fucking sick and tired of tiny hubs. Make them massive, make them large, make the hub just as fun to explore as the world, and make the hub the size of a world map, or at least part of one, like half of one, so that I can go and find all these nooks and crannies and collectibles. Like they did a better job with the Destiny 2 tower than the first one. The first one was Garbo
Yeah.
and boring. The second one, they had all these nooks and crannies, but once you explored those, that was pretty much it. And now, since they've built out the tower and there's all these other story elements in it, it's even more of a maze-like structure, which I think is great. But I mean, obviously they don't want you to spend all your time in the tower, but it should be interesting. The world should feel alive. It should feel lived in. And they started to do that with Destiny and then just forgot to finish it. Like, why are there no other people in any of these places? Why are there only aliens there? How come we don't have any outposts there? What, like so many questions, design choices I don't understand. But overall, if you can you can make your gameplay fun, which Destiny was until it wasn't. And then the only thing that was really fun about, because doing the same exact places over and over and over and over and over and over and over again is not fun. It's not. You did them because you wanted to grind to get the next good thing, to be a little bit more strong, to be able to do the next thing, to get to the raid or whatever, but their loop sucked. It still sucks. It's better now, but it's still not fucking fixed. Like that's horrible. Like you should always feel like you're progressing forward, not like, oh, I got to do my exercises this week. That's fucking a dumpster
Yeah,
fire.
that's when it becomes a
I can't
chore.
tell you like none of the worlds did I enjoy visiting after the first, like, say, 20 hours of gameplay. Like, none of them. Like, I hated Mars. I hated the moon. I hated Earth. Like, I fucking hated going anywhere. The environments were dull, drab, and boring. Nothing was interesting. Like, Destiny 2 made it a little bit bigger, a little like a bit better because there were different zones within
Yeah.
each
I
world,
think
and so those zones could look different.
the only area I liked in Destiny 1 was the Dreadnought when you could go on what's
Yeah,
his face's ship because they actually had interesting like the events you actually got to you needed to do them for some gear or you could do them for good gear, especially that one where you summon some of the daughter witches or whatever and you fight them in this little arena and they'll have different debuffs that start like the thing with the public events of Destiny were like a do one and then you never ever need to do them again. They weren't ever engaging after like the first like oh this is kind of cool kind of thing. They didn't make the
yeah.
world I oh god, I just lost him. He'll be back. But they didn't really make the world itself um what's the word I'm trying to say? The world itself wasn't engaging enough in what you needed to do, I guess. Welcome back, good sir.
Hello.
Hello. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think once you go through a world the first time, there's never any reason to go back. They were just there and they existed and they never really kept that content within the loop of shit you had to do to make it engaging enough. It was always just you were moving between instances once you got high enough. So I can see that definitely. And
Yeah,
I
they in the second one, the world was much bigger,
yeah, but even then you
which was
still
a
didn't
huge
do anything in
improvement.
them. Like you just go maybe
Nope.
once in a while, maybe go for a quest or to go unlock a dungeon, but outside of that, you had no reason to ever be in the open world areas in Destiny. You're just hopping instance to instance in late game.
But at the very least, they could start you. They got pretty creative in some areas where they'd start you in an area, but they'd start you in an area coming from a direction you weren't used to.
Yeah.
So it would take a few minutes for you to realize where you were, which is pretty good.
Another thing that was kind of cool that they did when it was they introduced Forsaken is they actually had like a hunt system where every week you could pick up bounties and these people would you get clues and they'd be anywhere within the open world map so you had to go hunt them out and find them and then it would be a boss fight that would ensue once you got there. Those were kind of cool too. They gave some incentive to go back because the rewards you were granting were putting you back, and that's a smart way to reuse the content because they didn't have to develop any new areas, and it's still engaging because you got interesting boss fights when you got there, and it made sense in the lore and everything. It was a good addition to the game, and it made use of the worlds they had built already and kept you in them because they were good. They were well designed. Just there wasn't shit to do in them. And well designed, I mean like aesthetically, obviously.
Yeah, I was just disappointing um, that they didn't put more, just a little bit more effort in sometimes, especially with the color. They got a little bit better with the color. The color in the first game was terrible.
Oh yeah, it was pretty
And I get
drab.
it for Mars. I get Mars, all right, but you could do things to jazz that
Like
up.
Titan was
You could
cool as
have,
fuck in Destiny 2. Like you being on the
uh,
water and like in the facilities and going in that one underground facility that all the lights in it was like all over ground.
yeah,
That was all a really cool area.
yeah, but then you have that other one that was all like pastel yellow and pastel green. I can't remember
Oh,
what that one
IO.
was.
IO.
IO, and I was like, that one just looked like somebody puked on it. It was
uh
not good.
okay. So we've talked content, we've talked gear, we've talked gameplay in between. I'm thinking what other thing obviously that are important for these is how the devs will make their money. So,
Communication.
oh well, yeah, that well,
Destiny, Bungie lied to us. They lied to us repeatedly.
yeah.
They manipulated the gameplay repeatedly and lied about it. First, they made it so that it took double the amount of experience. Was it the experience that they nerfed, or how many they were giving out? I think
The
I think
experience itself, it took longer because they had the
first they nerfed the
boxes.
experience so that you would have to buy the loot boxes instead of getting them naturally because they used to give them to you when you got a certain number of points a week.
Yeah.
And then but gamers, we have time on our hands and we
Yeah.
will find it.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people dug into the code and they figured, or they timed it
They
out or
timed
figured it
it,
out or
yeah.
whatever, and it was taking them a lot longer to earn those free loot boxes. Now, this is a $60 game that we bought, right? A $60 game. And with that game came the promise that we'd be receiving a loot box every so often at certain milestones, and that we would have to buy the rest. And we were fine with that. It's a ripoff, but we were fine with that. We paid $60 for it. Sell the rest of the content in chunks or do a fucking subscription. But don't try and, I mean, don't count on the game surviving off of you nickel and diming us through loot boxes. That shouldn't be the sole source of income for the game. And then when they got busted on that, they're like, "Oh, sorry, yeah, that was a mistake. We were testing something out, or we didn't realize or mean to, or whatever." And they fixed it. But then immediately after nerfing that, then they went and did something else. And I'm trying to remember. I think first was how long your experience was, and then it was how much experience you were getting, or something along those lines. But they did it right when they released that Vex expansion, the first expansion for Destiny 2 that had Osiris in it, voiced by that guy from Resident Evil and like a bunch and fucking the Mummy, and it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
I know what you're talking about.
Uh, yeah, the Osiris thing was right about the time they got caught in that double lie, 'cause they lied once and then lied again. And that was when I was done. Like the second time, I was like, "You lied to us twice. You are manipulating the system sneakily, slyly behind our back. You're not communicating openly. We tell you there's problems with the game. You say you hear us, but nothing changes. And I mean, we're giving you our money. We're spending money on these fucking loot boxes. We're buying your expansions, and you're doing the same exact thing. You had a whole bunch of content done when you released the game. You locked it behind paying for expansions when it was already there on the disc. You did that twice. Then your first several releases, starting with Osiris and Destiny 2, and starting with I think it was the wolf thing and the original Destiny, you started releasing these micro content where you get like an extra 5 missions or 8 missions, and then you're just completely devoid of
To
anything
be to
new.
be fair, that was like every expansion, like to this day. But like you get like 5 main story
Oh, the
missions.
Siva was huge. The Siva one was much longer.
No, it was still like I
You
mean
had like
there was content there, but in the story itself, it was still like 3 or 4 missions. The missions themselves. It added a new
I
open
know
world area
there
too,
was
but
a
like
yeah.
there were like literally like 3 or 4 missions. Every single Destiny major content patch or expansion they've dropped has been like 3 to 4 main story missions. You'll get like a strike or two, and then sometimes a major raid, and then they'll have like little things in between or stuff they do into the open world that changes stuff
I'm
around.
positive they were more than that.
No, they were.
And they also got creative with those missions. They actually started giving you new environments to go into, new places to go, places that they had intentionally locked you out of before just so you wouldn't explore them and get bored with them. And then they made them new and interesting because now you were able to get in there to do this strike or this new mission or this
Yeah,
new
yeah.
thing.
All right.
And that's just a ripoff. Like people are paying 30, 40, $50 for these fucking expansions, and they're getting 3 hours of fucking
Yeah.
content if they're lucky, and that's asinine and terrible. So I when dude when fucking Final Fantasy releases a content update, now bear in mind this is a drastically different situation because that is a subscription based game. It's a much higher quality experience overall that's going to have a lot more communication to the players, and it's going to have a lot more honesty, but they could still
It
do
doesn't
that
have, yeah, it
with the
doesn't
other
have to
ones.
have the communication. The content will be there, but they don't have to say shit. Because sometimes, like with BFA, early BFA for WoW, there was communications issues. Now they're much better about it with Shadowlands. They're talking a lot more to the community. But I think in every game that's necessary. Any game you're going to further
It
content for,
absolutely is.
yeah, you need it. So
It
I,
absolutely is necessary. When you're not communicating with your players, when you're lying to them, they will leave. Like we love a game. Like, dude, I am very, very like I'm heavily leaning towards not buying Final Fantasy this time around, and I have never not bought a Final Fantasy title because I'm sick and tired of them not listening to us.
mhm. I mean, that's the best
And
way to do
I
it.
and
Vote
I'm
with your
tired
wallet.
of fucking putting I want to, it's a world I've always wanted to go back to. And I saw that trailer and there was nothing about that. If they hadn't said it was Final Fantasy, I would be interested in it as a game. But as a Final Fantasy game, I have no interest in that. Like I
Yeah.
want to see a Final
It
Fantasy
could have
game
been
that's
like a
not a Final
Dragon's
Fantasy
Dogma
game.
game or some shit. Yeah.
Yes, or a fucking what's that other one? The one Dragon Age. Could have been a fucking Dragon
Oh, yeah.
Age game. Could have been a number of those fucking
Okay,
things.
okay,
Like,
okay.
why?
Hey, back up. So communication, very important. Very important indeed. And I agree, the 14
Extremely.
devs are very good at keeping that line open, right? They have the constant fan letters. They literally sit down in a stream and talk like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. When the whole COVID thing came out, it's like every other day they were dropping shit like, hey, this is what's going on. We're trying to get people situated in the office. We're having issues. There's going to be delays, obviously. Stuff's going on. And people, oh my God, the community was understanding because they knew the
Because they talk
context
to us.
of the changes. Even even the fact that it doesn't even have to be the fact that you feel respected because you're being talked to. It's because you know the context of changes. If a dev team comes out and the change has to be made and they talk about the change, if you don't talk and the change happens, the players, you think yourself into, okay, this might be a greedy change. They don't know. But if you come out and straight up say to them, even if it was a greedy change, at least you had the respect to tell them. That's when the respect part kicks in. You have the respect
Because
to
when
tell
Square
them.
makes a mistake, they tell us before we notice half the time, like, hey, look, we tried this out. It didn't work. We're fixing it. I know if you haven't noticed it, this is what was going on, et cetera, et cetera. They know that they're living off of a subscription, that we're paying their paycheck. And they're very cognizant of that fact. And they're cognizant of the brand that they're trying to preserve, which I wish the rest of fucking Square was, like the corporate
Yeah.
end. But it's important. That's vital. So I'm very aware of the fact that they're taking these steps to make sure that things are handled appropriately, where you never felt that with Destiny, you never felt that with Anthem. I mean, everybody, there's nobody on this planet that is under the mistaking identity of thinking that that EA or Activision or Ubisoft gives two shits about who is actually giving them money. They don't care. They do not care. It doesn't matter to them. Like the actual audience is completely secondary to them, and building brand loyalty is not something that they, because it's just people need to vote with their wallets more. Is the end result of me grumping about that? Is they really do. Like if that's the direction Final Fantasy goes, and that's it, and that's what it's doing, then that's what it's doing. But if you don't want something to do that, don't give them money.
Yeah.
The thing that worries me about Square is when Square fails, they just double down on doing something different rather than trying to improve their fucking failures.
Yeah, we'll see
And
what
that's a
happens.
little scary to me.
All right. So yes, communication is important. I was also going to bring up like monetization, although there's not a lot to talk about monetization because that comes down to how the company decides to make their game, right? Where Destiny, they eventually introduced more monetization methods. There's a lot now. There's effectively a subscription service with their season plus thing that they have where I don't know exactly what it does, but like you get more benefits for paying for like a season of the game, and when that season ends, I don't know if it's actually battle pass, like you get levels and get shit. I'm not entirely sure. It might be
Why not just call it a fucking subscription and not make people
because
jump through hoops to get the goodies?
that's like a negative connotation for some people. Again, like some people don't like the commitment, quote unquote, because it's none. You can literally turn it off and on at any fucking point. The commitment of a subscription based game. That's one of the reasons I think MMOs aren't as big as today as they are, is because a lot of people don't like the idea of, oh, I gotta pay $15 for the $15 a month for this game or whatever. Even though if you think about it, and the amount of content these games usually offer, you'll spend less money on other games that you would have bought, but it's whatever. It's a stupid argument in my opinion. But that's the thing. They don't like the word subscription because it's just it turns off some people. But so yeah, monetization. I'm okay with further monetization in any game in general, of course, especially these types of games because they need to fund further development in some way. In my opinion, so I get because there's not really a go-to for this. I think just some things that
Warframe.
Even
Warframe's
Warframe,
a go-to.
even Warframe has some issues with it. Like I don't like the idea that like some of the stuff to like upgrade certain elements of the game you kind of had to buy to get some kind of progress. Like I don't know how it is now, but back in the day, Forma was kind of difficult to get, and you could buy Forma, and Forma was how you upgrade like your guild hall and all this other shit. So some things are difficult. They do allow you to free to play yourself with time a lot of stuff, which is nice. I do appreciate that, and it helps fund further development for the people that want to whale and spend a lot of money to get some of the nicer looking stuff they can. I don't like. It's kind of weird. I'm fine with it existing, but I'm not the biggest fan of like locking cool looking things behind a paywall in these types of games, because the whole point of like I was saying earlier in the gear treadmill, one of the major points of that is the idea of the stuff looking cool so you can show off. So when you have some of the stuff looking cool so you can show off is in the thing that you spend money for, it kind of defeats the purpose for me, kind of. And it annoys me to a degree. Like, because there's developmental resources that went towards that could have gone to actual raid gear to help fuel the gear treadmill, to get the cool looking stuff, instead of, oh, I spent $15 on this gear set. I think that kind of defeats the purpose in a looter based game.
You could farm Forma easily enough.
I don't remember. I don't remember being able to.
You could farm everything because we would get it. We just didn't get it in large chunks. If you wanted to get it enough to make a change to your place immediately. I mean, I felt that we were spending enough time in the game that I was perfectly willing to sit there and I was getting so much fun out of Warframe
I bought Forma
at
too.
the time.
So
yeah, I think I spent like $100 or something on
I don't know how much I spent in Warframe in total. It's probably like close to 30 or 40, just buying stuff here and there. I never like bought out like full on large packs or full on like suits or whatever. But I'd say for a free to play game, Warframe does pretty good. Like there's enough for the free to play player that can play free to play, kind of like Genshin. I think Genshin operates in the same formula to a degree. It's probably a little bit worse because you can't really work towards a character like you can in Warframe. But there's enough in the cast that they grant you that you can still pretty much play the entire game and have fun, like in Warframe. But it'd be cool if there was a system they implemented in Genshin, which I doubt will ever happen, where you can work towards recruiting a character or something. Like there's actually a system like that in Epic 7, Sean, where if you complete a certain amount of challenges, you gain notoriety with a character, and you can recruit them to your team once you complete those challenges. You never know. With these games, it's telling you, like, these gacha games are so volatile in how they change. This game could be something completely different 6 months down the line in regards to its systems, not necessarily the gameplay, but its systems. They change so insanely as they mature. This game could be one of the worst or friendliest gacha games in 6 months to a year that we've ever seen. You don't really know. It really depends on how they respond to the thing. But yeah,
I wonder how much money they would lose if they incorporated an a la carte system.
I don't know. To be honest, I'm sure it depends how much that would be something they'd have to sit down and be like, because their rates are pretty bad in Genshin. I think the biggest problem with Genshin's like gacha system is the fact that the free currency isn't super easy to come by. You don't really get a lot of it. And a lot of we have yet to see their first event. I don't know how much they'll be giving in this co-op event for like regards to pools and stuff, but sometimes their games in general, the gacha games are generous with event pools. They'll give out a certain amount of free pools for just playing the game. But the Prima gems are not easy to come by in Genshin. And I think there was even reports that they nerfed some of the Prima Gen gain rate, like from chests and shit. Like normally they'd give you like 5 to 10, but now they only give you like 2 to 6 or some shit like that. So they've heavily nerfed like the amount of currency you can acquire in an effort to make people spend money. But other games, they're pretty loosey goosey about how much shit they give you, especially again as they mature. So we don't really know. I don't even know if I answered that question properly, but yeah. So yeah,
it's just a curiosity. Because I love the a la carte idea, you know, or at the very least, like, I don't know, somewhere where if you really want to get a character, you absolutely can get them. It's not chance, and it's not a complete ripoff. Like I could easily see each character being $20.
Maybe the 5-star being more. I can see the 5 stars going up to like 40.
Maybe 40. Yeah, I could see that. I would be willing, like, to go in and spend like say $30 or $20 on a 4-star that you want, and because you gotta think, like, you need multiple copies of one to max it out. That's a lot of money, right?
To give an extreme example, I've seen people spend close to $5,000 to $6,000 just for one 5-star. So, but that's an extreme example. I don't know. like not everyone's willing to go to that level. Some people are just haven't spent any money, are just playing it free to play to enjoy it. They don't give a shit about the characters, which is completely fine in its own right. So I don't really know. It'd be kind of hard to gauge how much money they'd lose if they let people just buy the characters, because you don't know how much potential income you're losing because it's a rate. There's probably some kind of algorithm or like figure they can pull up that will give you, you can plug in numbers and get kind of an estimate. But
I doubt they would share it with us, but it
no,
would be
yeah.
good to see.
I would like a change to the constellation system. There should be another way to upgrade characters outside of duplicates. I think the same thing with the weapons. There's so many changes they can make to this game to make it better and more friendly. Um, but
Especially the artifacts. Like if you run out of low level artifacts,
yeah,
you
people have already
and there's also like polish things, like being able to see the stats of what you're feeding into something else. You can go, nope, I want to keep this one, but nope, we'll dump
they've
this
already
one. I got two of
confirmed
this one.
they're already confirmed there'll be a lock system, so you can lock an artifact that you want to keep.
Thank fucking God. They
Yeah, so
need
that's
that.
coming.
That's like a common gotcha
Yeah,
thing that
they
is
can
for some reason not
they
in here.
confirmed a lock system. They confirmed the system where if you're like level 9 on the statues, you can find the rest of them. They have a thing where you can eat food quickly in combat. It's like a little pouch that lets you eat food quickly in combat.
You can balance that by just limiting how much you could put in there.
Well, that's already balanced because you could only feed so much food to a character; they get full if you feed too much food to a character. So it's already balanced. They don't really
Fucking, they get a frowny face.
yeah.
I love how you figure that out. You're like, what the fuck is this face for? Oh,
They're adding a system where you can put a custom waypoint that you can fast travel to. A single custom waypoint you can fast travel to. So say like
that's not bad. That's
so,
not even necessary. That's just
yeah.
a nice thing
So
to do.
say if you want to like get to like a farming spot or something, you could put down that waypoint down, and fast travel straight to that farming spot for free and stuff. So that's kind of cool.
I just make a permanent waypoint for the beginning of a chest run and leave it there.
Yeah, I there's other things they confirmed. There's a lot of like quality of life improvements coming. They've also talked about adding a way, because right now where artifacts you can only use other artifacts to upgrade them. They were talking about adding a system like how the weapons work, where you could get crystals to upgrade the artifacts as well, and implementing that in the game somehow. But yeah, they're talking. The only really feedback they haven't really addressed is the resin system. They haven't talked about it at all. So that might be something that has to get approval from higher ups or something. That would be an interesting thing, because that would also affect their bottom line, how much money they're making, because people do spend money on resin refills. So that's all probably stuff that's probably difficult to like completely come out and say, hey, we're looking at this, because they might have to get some kind of approval. And they were on, like, China had like a week-long holiday just recently, so like the devs were on holiday like right after the game came out, which seemed like an awful thing to do. I don't know why the fuck they did that, but they came back and now they're in damage control. So but hey, if you're making 100 million in less than 2 weeks, they're probably still okay. They're not fretting that much. But fuck yeah, so that's about it. Do you have like a don't for monetization, Sean, when it comes to these games? Something you don't like to see? Like I said, I don't like to see people being able to buy
like,
cool-looking
gotcha
stuff.
True. I don't like gotcha. I think gotcha is a giant fucking ripoff. I think that is
it's
gambling,
effectively
100%.
It's loot boxes. It's the same shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like loot boxes. I like the a la carte thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And or I like loot boxes that have workable, like if it's a loot box but there's only 4 things in it.
Yeah, or I'd like the idea
or it's a loot box of a set, so you're getting batches of the set, so it's more like a blind draw.
Yeah.
Like you want the or even more to the point, one where you can check a box, and if you've already got a double, it won't come up.
Yeah, I think
like things like that to give you more control. To make it less random.
I think duplicates in general should not exist in these types of, in just loot boxes,
or at least give somebody a fair, workable alternative, like what they do in Epic 7.
Well,
where you don't have to have duplicates of a character to max them out.
Yeah.
Where in every other gacha you fucking do.
Yeah, and most gacha games, the way they remedy that is they just give out enough stuff to get free pulls that it kind of just evens out. But yeah, it is a shitty system in general. It is predatory by nature. It's the same thing that we've talked about for loot boxes for ages. It's just it hasn't been popular enough in the West to see any kind of legal recourse that we've seen from all the pushback to loot boxes. But it may be with Genshin. We'll have to see what happens there. So
It would
but
be such a better game if they had some other system
in
place.
regards to other looter shooters or just shooters or looters in general, do you have anything in regards to monetization that you don't like to see?
Not really. I don't like anybody having a better chance at being able to get something than I do when they're in the same position, or even if just because they've got more money than I happen to get, so they get to enjoy the game more. I don't think that's fair.
I get that.
I get frustrated. I mean, I realize that it's just a part of the environment, but I get frustrated anytime I read that whole re-rolling thing where people cheat by setting up hundreds of accounts and putting in
Oh yeah,
all this fucking time, and I'm
to get the
like, okay,
characters they
so
want. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, well, maybe I wanted a character too, but I couldn't do that, or because I've got too much time, but that doesn't make me less deserving of getting that character. Like, I just hate the fucking idea. There's nothing you can do about it, but it's fucking annoying to me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't appreciate the fact that there are people out there that have the 80 deck. But on the other hand, that's not an entirely fair statement for me to make either. Like, I can easily admit that I'm not saying that that's a reasonable thing, but I think my biggest pet peeve is just loot boxes. I've hated loot boxes thoroughly since I spent, like, how much did we spend on average every time
Overwatch.
Overwatch
I
had a thing come
fucking.
out? What was it?
I eventually just said fuck it because we kept getting garbage every single time. But what
Yep,
I would try to
me
do
too.
is I would try within the because they had like limited time skins and shit. You know the FOMO. Fuck Blizzard,
Yeah.
man. It kind of pissed me off so much. But I tried to do as much as I can to get as many boxes as I could, and then like on the usually depending like near the last day when I'm just like I don't have any more, I'll buy some to see if I could get any skins. But outside of that, I think we did it for like 2 or 3 events. Then we just
But how
stopped.
much was it? Was it 100? Was it
No,
60?
I think every time I'd put at most it was
We always did
40.
the big batch.
I no, I there was one more above. I think I did 40 every time I did it, so I would do 40, and that was for a
Because I
sixty
remember
dollar
you and I
game.
spent the same amount
That
each
was for
time.
that was for I think it was
Because we
40.
do it once.
I
And the
don't. I
one
never
time
spent
that
a hundred. I never spent 100 on that game at a
well,
single
I don't
time.
think they had 100 for that. But the one time that I went hardcore was I really wanted the lifeguard skin
Oh, for McCree.
for
Yeah, you never got
McCree.
it. I remember.
And they didn't tell you what was in the skin box, and I bought the maximum size I could get twice because I really wanted that skin. Like, I really liked it. It was his best skin. In my opinion, it was super fun. And I spent it twice, and I got all of the fucking summer skins from the previous year.
Oh yeah, yeah. That shit's dumb as fuck too. They were
And
really
that
bad.
was just like that was a complete ripoff. Like, if they had had a retro box for like the stuff from last year and it was like significantly cheaper, that would have been an entirely different deal. But I already had all this shit from the previous year, and I wasn't in a box to get the previous year, and that wasn't in the ad. The ad was for all of these other ones.
Bro. And keep
And
in
I
mind,
got
also keep in mind for like I don't know how many people were like in this like they didn't even have to disclose rates either back then. Now they do because it's like law in most places where if you're doing a box they have to disclose the rates of like what's inside. Like the reason we know the rates are so shit in Genshin is because they tell us they have to, especially in like Asian
because
countries.
they sell it in Korea.
It's law over there. I think even Japan is introduced it as law when it comes to like online infrastructure or transactions and shit. If it has gambling elements, the rate has to be in the box somewhere. And
You've got such a high portion of gamers out there now that you can literally destabilize an economy by getting somebody addicted to something. If you get a high enough group of people addicted to a game or a series of games and they're all losing money to it and it's fucking up their bills and shit, uh like you can cause economic damage.
yeah, I
It's
think
kind of
most
fucking crazy.
yeah that's the weapon. That's what China's trying to take us out, bro. Genshin Impact. It was the
Oh god.
the harbinger. Fucking oh my god. Um, but yeah, I agree. I don't like loot boxes either. I like gacha games mostly for the elements that they portray, and
It
a
can
lot of
be
time.
fun. Just give people an alternative.
Oh
That's
yeah, yeah,
all I'm
that's all
asking
they need,
for is give me
and most do.
an alternative way to do it to get the characters that that isn't as predatory. Like, maybe I have
Yeah,
to put in a little bit more work, but a little less money.
or even the
Give me
just
something,
yeah. Hopefully they
give
make
me a pass that guarantees that I'm going to get one of this and one of that for
yeah,
like
or like
half. a price, but I have to do these missions or
Like,
something.
or they had a new thing in the battle pass or something where like 2 times across the course of the pass you can get like a free 4-star pull, like a guaranteed 4-star character, and a free 5-star pull at the end. So it will guarantee
Yeah,
you,
could you
maybe not what you
imagine?
want, but like you're guaranteed a 5-star, guaranteed a 4-star character.
Could you imagine if they did that and you could get any 4-star of your choice
That's what
and then
people were
one random
leaking.
5-star?
Yeah, people were leaking that. That was news for a bit. None of it was true, as far as I'm aware. But they were saying that they were changing the pity system, where every certain amount of pulls you were given a resource that would give you a guaranteed. It's like a pick one resource. So you pop it up and it'll give you a menu. You could pick one 4-star, or every certain often you get one 5-star pick, and you could pick them. That would solve a
I
lot
don't
of
even
problems, to
see
be
why
honest.
they'd be losing out with that either.
Yeah, it would still force people to spend the money to get the stuff, and then that would even help for people trying to max out constellations. So it would kind of be like a good band-aid to fix multiple problems at once and still keep people buying shit. But I don't know, it may still be coming. They haven't completely denounced that its existence. It's just they were saying be careful with some leaks, and there are plenty of leaks. So it is
And
what it
they've
is.
also confirmed that they were fixing Lisa and not Lisa,
Mona
Mona, and they
and
were
Kiki,
fixing
or I forget her
TT.
name. Yeah, I forget her name.
TT.
The one with the
Yeah.
the katana, whatever.
No,
King
it's not TT.
Queen King something. I don't know.
Kakichi or Kachichi or
Yeah, whatever.
Kenichi or fucking whatever.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
fixed
her.
both of them, and they also gave out like 100 prima gems for each fix, even to the people that didn't have
To
the
like
characters.
everyone.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
kind of cool. People were complaining about that
Which is,
shit. I'm like,
I
fuck
maxed out
you.
Barbara's talents with that.
All right.
Like,
Well,
or unlocked all of her constellations. That's what I did. Never mind.
okay. So that was a good discussion. So, for all you tuning in, what do you think? Let us know what for if you are avid fans of looter type games. What do you think? Do you agree with some of our opinions? Disagree? Where do you think these looter games have failed? What parts of it really put you off and stopped you from playing if you did play them, or what parts of it were the things that kept you around? Let us know. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the episode. Oh wait, we're in Spooktober, fellas. And I think Alex sent me a clip to use for it, so I'm gonna have to put together a Spooktober clip. Actually, no, don't we
Nice.
do
Thank
that?
you, Alec.
Actually, well, yeah, thank you. But I think we do that when we start the reviews. I don't do it now. I don't remember how I did it.
No.
I'd have to go back.
Well, you did it when you announced it, and then every time the reviews came. But this time, fuck it, whatever.
I don't remember. I'd have to go back and listen. It's been a while. But so we're starting up Spooktober. Week late, fashionably late, as I like to say. But
As we are every year.
we're gonna be watching spooky movies to get ready for spooky season. We love that. This is hands down my favorite time of the year. Halloween into Thanksgiving into Christmas. Love. And what we do every year, me and Sean, we sit down with you guys too, hopefully, if you want to follow along. We watch scary movies during October, Christmas movies during December, and we go ham on that shit. We come back, we review them. We talk about the movies, what we liked, what we disliked, and we give an overall review. So if you want to follow along on this adventure with us for Spooktober, definitely. We're going to give out the movies. Also, we got a request. So if you guys do have ones you want us to talk about that we haven't seen, we'll be willing to take those throughout the rest of this month, and we'll just fit them in over other movies that Sean's already planned out, because we have always asked, like, hey guys, we want to see. We got one from Lark. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Thanksgiving.
Oh no.
He said he wanted.
no.
He said he wanted to hear about that. I've never seen it.
Oh, it's so bad.
All right.
Oh, it's painfully bad.
So would you like to supplement it in the list somewhere?
Oh God, it's so bad though. It's so bad. That's the one with the turkey puppet, right?
I have no idea. I think
Look at the image on Google real quick
Okay.
and tell me what you see, and I'll tell you exactly how painful this fucking movie is.
I think he's doing it on purpose, but
He
that's
has
fine.
to be, because you wouldn't make somebody. That's not one of those like it's all right. Like it's one of those movies.
There's-
It's like it wants to be so good it's bad, but they intentionally made it bad,
Oh,
so it doesn't fucking count.
like
Sharknado.
that. Oh yeah, or that one about the birds. But oh wow, it's like
Yeah.
it's a turkey.
It's a turkey puppet.
Oh, it says
Yeah,
warning.
it
It
says-
says warning boobs in the first second.
Yeah, it's like it almost is charming. It almost, but if you intentionally
We're
make
not
something
reviewing
cheap,
it. We're not reviewing it.
specific, yeah, it's not good. It's so
Okay.
bad.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to watch it with you then as we suffer
Yeah,
together.
you can. God damn, I tried to pick decent ones.
It's
Oh
good.
fuck.
It will balance it out. We'll balance it out.
Oh, then what's on the list? What did I put in there?
We have. Should I say all of them? That seems like that'd be. I don't want to spoil the movies we're gonna watch for the people
Hold on,
tuning
let me look at what I sent you.
in. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil them. I just
Well,
let me.
one year you gave it all out. Like week one, we're doing this. Week two, we're
I
doing
don't want to
this,
do that.
etc. So,
It's gonna be a surprise.
uh,
So just say like the first or second of what week is the one you want to supplement, and then I'll switch it out, or I can't edit it, but we'll just throw it in there for that week.
let me see which one's going to be the hardest for people to watch. That one's on YouTube. That one's on Prime. That one's on Prime. That one's on Prime. It was on Netflix for like ever. Or Tubi. That one's on Prime or YouTube or Tubi. That one's on Prime. We're not taking the free ones out. The ones
Okay,
that we
that's
already
fine.
have subscriptions to. So I would say take out. God, I can't believe we're fucking watching this movie again. I hate that movie. Is the suffering is real? Week. What is it? Week one. First film of week two.
Okay. All right. Well. Easy.
That movie is a Cthulhu film, or very Cthulhu-esque film, very heavily inspired by Cthulhu.
Interesting. Okay.
Um,
So first
pretty good.
week, Spooktober. We hope you guys will follow along with us. Keep up with the movies we're watching. It's 2 a week. It's not impossible. A lot of these are either rented on Prime or free on streamable services. So
I did a little bit of research and added in, so you can each week you can announce those results out because those are the services that I have them easiest to get to.
okay. So for week 1 of Spooktober, round of applause. We're here.
Whoop, whoop.
Let's get it. We have the Midnight Meat Train and Puppet Master. Midnight Meat Train is available on its Prime subscription. So if you're subscribed to Amazon Prime, you have access to it, or you can do it for like free for a month with a credit card and then just cancel it. And then we have Puppet Master, which is available on Prime or part of a Hulu subscription. So ways to watch it. Also for all of these, if you forget, they'll be in the description below, and you can just Google the name of the movie, and Google will give you the streamable things usually.
Just Google the name and then like streaming on.
Yeah.
So like Puppet Master streaming on, and there's one site called Collider or something like that. I don't fucking recall what it's called, but they just do that. They collate what streaming services have stuff, and then sometimes Google will tell you.
Yeah. So definitely, we hope you join us. We'll be back next week to review these, and we'll talk about them. So hope you can join us. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap up this week. Again, let us know what you thought about our discussion on Destiny looter shooters. What do you think? Do you think they're dying? Are they dead? Should they die? Or do you want to see more of them? Let us know what you think. Sean, get us out of here.
This is all your pink parts.
Aw, shit. Dude, I don't have my facts pulled up. Okay.
You never do have the facts pulled up. What are you talking about?
It's because I talked to you first because you're my light and worlds, and then I don't realize
So
I have something I have to look
You're
up.
my light and world and things and stuff.
Yeah, bro.
Anal sex. Whoa.
I'm trying to think. This is gonna get to a point where I'm just not gonna remember which ones I said and not said. I think, but at that point it'll be so long gone that people won't remember either.
Unless you have somebody that actually goes back and listens to everything, they'll be
And
like,
if they do,
I caught you.
If they do, fuck them.
I caught you.
Okay, this one sounds interesting. Okay, before we go, I should leave you all with a thought. This one sounds really fucking weird. I don't know if it's true or not, but count the number of cricket chirps in a 15-second period, add 37 to the total, and your result will be very close to the actual outdoor Fahrenheit temperature.